number is 24 RS 2646, and it deals with changing the level of money that goes to clubhouse models by expanding it from currently in the fiscal year it was 9 and then or 8 and then 9 to $12 million and makes it statutory. This is from the lottery receipts.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion for the bill introduction. There is a second by Representative Mason. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Any other further bill introductions this morning? All right, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is a briefing by the Midwest Higher Education Compact. And so we have Susan Heegard, President of the Midwest Higher Education Compact. Ms. Heegard.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Susan Heegard. I'm the president of the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Rob Trembath, who's our COO and General Counsel, and our freshly minted 3 weeks on the job Vice President for Contracts and Programs, Brianne Haig, and they're with me today. I think we have about 10 minutes. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, I can talk fast. So y'all have a packet, and then there's some information over here. I'm going to work from these slides, but what I really wanted to do was also draw your attention in your packet to a couple things. One is a highlight sheet that looks like this, and this would hit all the key things that are in your PowerPoint, and it really summarizes our annual work in Kansas, but also across the Midwest. Then we've got 2 sheets that summarize our programs and the contracts that are used in your state. There's a summary sheet, I believe, on all the 12 states and the savings and usage that they have. But I'm going to focus on this deck here, if that's okay. So just a quick briefing, and then we're going to present some data. We were founded in 1991 through the Council of State Governments and the Midwest Legislative Conference. There are 12 states in our compact, and for those of you that aren't familiar with what compacts do, it's really has its roots in the United States Constitution, and it allows one or more states to do business with one or more states without the federal government's involvement. So there are all kinds of compacts for hunting and fishing and clean water and that sort of thing. We live up in the Twin Cities, so Great Lakes. This compact is focused on higher education cost savings. There are 4 compacts in the United States, one in the West, one in the Northeast, and one in the South. Ours is focused on the 12 states in the Midwest census region. Kansas was one of the first members to join the compact in 1990. Should I advance this? Oh, okay. Yeah, in 1990, and the annual state commitment, which has remained the same for over a decade, is $115,000. We're the lowest commitment of all the 4 compacts. And in exchange for that, you get access to all of our cost savings programs and contracts. Here's a quick photo of our commissioners. There are 5 commissioners from each state and 2 alternates. Legislature appoints 4, and then the governor appoints 3 people, and it's a mix of higher ed leaders as well as policymakers. Next slide. So what's the value that we provide to Kansas? And we really like to talk about this in terms of the ROI on your investment of $115,000. So we have cost savings programs and contracts. That would include technology, hardware, software, and services. We have a student health program. We have had a property insurance program that we're sunsetting, but we've kept a captive insurance program, and we're going to put that into dormancy, allowing for us to think about what we might want to do with that next. And your state has taken advantage of the property insurance program over the years. And I'll talk about, remind me to talk about why we sunset that in just a moment. We have research. We have a pretty cool data dashboard that we developed that allows you to take Kansas and compare yourself to all your border states, any other state, the best performing states in the country on a whole host of indicators, grad rates, cost of college, and that sort of thing. Next slide. The cost savings for Kansas. You really use the commitment wisely, and so that return is 34-fold. In 2023, Kansas's colleges, university school districts, and state and local governments. So in contracts, that's the one area where not just higher ed, but K-12 districts and local units of government can take advantage of the programs. They realized over $3.8 million in cost savings through our contracts and programs. 2.2 of that was based on 24.97 million in purchases of technology, hardware, software, and services. The biggest contract is with Dell, but also there's Oracle and HP and lots of other contracts. It's like a menu to pick and choose from. We do all that front work, so there's savings on the contract itself, but then there's also time spent. And if you want to talk to us more about that afterwards, we'd happy to do that. But we do the public bid work. It's all done for you, and then you can take the contract and tailor that on your own. Then Kansas also saved money through something called the Midwest State Authorization Reciprocity Program, or in higher ed, love those acronyms, MSARA it's called. And before the distance ed programs had to, at an institution, if you wanted to offer a program in another state, you had to register in every single state and pay there if you wanted to offer the program. Now you just register once, and as long as you meet certain standards, and you can offer those programs. And it's been just a tremendous opportunity across the Midwest and for your state. Then we still have a Midwest Student Exchange Program. That's where a student or a citizen here can take advantage of going to college in another state for 150% of in-state tuition. The challenge there, we're taking a fresh look at that program because, as you've heard and probably read, a lot of institutions and states are eliminating out-of-state tuition. South Dakota has just done that and extended their in-state tuition to 10 states, I believe including yours. So on the next slide, I'm going to just quick touch on the research and try to move through this quick. This is a slide that shows your state's attainment rate, and really attainment is the educatedness of your state. So it's folks that have any degree beyond high school. And so I want to talk about higher ed very broadly. It's certificates, 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees, and beyond. And your state, of course, tracks above the national average for those 25 to 64-year-olds. Then if you look at this in more detail, I really like this slide. This comes from the Lumina Foundation, and this shows you really how that breaks out. So that blue, navy blue box is those that have less than a high school diploma. The orange represents those with a high school diploma. The orange is some college but no credential. And we had a really interesting conversation last night about one of the most difficult situations to be in is when you have some college or some post-secondary, post-high school, and a lot of debt and no degree to show for it, no certificate to show for it. And then it just shows beyond that where you are as a state. The next slide represents, if you dig down deeper, and all of our data is disaggregated by income, by gender, race, ethnicity. This shows just gaps in terms of your various populations with respect to who has those degrees. Then another way to look at this data that's pretty helpful is to look at your state as a whole and say, all right, what's happening with our overall population? What parts are growing, what parts aren't? You've heard a lot about birth rates. So in this slide, this basically shows that, like throughout the Midwest, unlike other parts of the country, we probably look more like the Northeast in terms of our populations. High school graduates are projected to decline in Kansas over the coming decade, with the sharpest decline in the number of white high school graduates. So if you look on the bars, the blue is the total population, the orange represents the white population, and the bars below that represent anyone else, so underrepresented populations. And the fastest growing population in your state, my understanding, is the Hispanic population. The next slide is a migration slide, and what's another thing that people say is, we're losing all our students. How do we keep them in the state? Or how do we attract students from other states? So this just gives you a 1-year window picture, but there's some very interesting work being done across the country with the Census Bureau to actually show this beyond a year. So looking at 5 and 10 years. Like in Iowa, they were able to show their students leave, but they stay in the Midwest, and a lot of them come home to work and have raise their families. So in this slide, you'll see your border states. More students migrate into Kansas than migrate out, so that's great news. The question is, how do you keep them? And the net in-migration in Kansas increased between 2020 and 22, while your border states experienced a decrease. The next slide might give you a headache this early in the morning, but this takes all the 12 states and just shows you who stays in their state, who stays in the Midwest, and who leaves. So in Kansas, of first-time college students in Kansas in 2022, 81% enrolled in state. That's very high. 9% enrolled elsewhere in the Midwest, so maybe just across the border or somewhere else, and 9% enrolled outside the Midwest. The next slide it reflects enrollment. So enrollments declined at public two-year institutions in Kansas since 2010-11 compared to a more recent undergraduate enrollment decline at public four-year institutions starting in 2016-17. So this decline just reflects the overall demographic information that we were talking about. So the question, I think one of the important questions is, if you are, how do you attract students into a program or, to get a certificate or a two-year, four-year degree or beyond? And then how do you ensure that they stay in so they're not one of those students who finish with debt and no credential at all? These slides talk about tuition and fees, so you're going to see a difference between these two and the next two. This would just be, after adjusting for inflation, the tuition and fees at Kansas public two-year and four-year institutions. So you can see up here, these are two-year institutions, and this is good news. With inflation, the tuition and fees decreased in 2023 and 24 and remained lower than the Midwest and the national averages. So the posted tuition is lower. On the next slide, you'll see something similar as well for the four-year institutions, that it's lower. The issue is on the next two slides, when you factor in things like financial aid, and that's when people talk about what's the net price. So if you have kids in college like I do and you filled out the FAFSA 8 times, I'm finally done with that, you will better understand what that net price means, and that's grants, financial aid, and that sort of thing. So the total cost of attendance, including your room and board, minus grant aid, we took the two groups, the lowest income and then kind of students 110 or above, 110,000 or above. In general, the cost of attendance, including room and board, minus grant aid for low-income students at Kansas public two-year institutions is above the Midwest and national average and higher than the prices in border states, meaning some of those states have really invested deeply in financial aid, so that's why you'll see the difference on this slide. And that's a choice. There are lots of different models out there. And for the four-year institutions, the average net price, the total cost of attendance, including room and board minus grant aid for low-income students at public four years, is above the Midwest and national averages, but lower than the price in border states. So four-year region institutions, for the four-year institutions, that is a bit lower. So tried to talk fast. I'm sorry if it was too fast. The last slide just highlights some of our resources that you're welcome to tap. We've got this dashboard that I talked about, and it's, if you're kind of a data geek, or even if you're not, it's kind of fun to play around with that. We'll show you the data by line graph, by bar chart, and by map. That's my favorite way to shake the data out and see what that looks like. So there's the data and resources that we make available to you. If you have any other questions, we're here. I think we finish our day with you, Mr. Chair. We'll be here until about 2:30. And we're really proud and happy to work with the state of Kansas. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Heegard. Are there any questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. A few questions. First of all, on slide, the second slide on page 10, and you have our neighboring states, but there's no Arkansas. Arkansas does not have a out-of-state tuition rate if you have a certain GPA or ACT or SET, I believe. So my question is the fact that more students migrate into Kansas for school, is that because of our low tuition rate, and how would that compare to Arkansas, or do you have that data? And secondly, relating to that, my question is, how many of them stay after those 2 to 4 years?
Ms. Heegard.
Mr. Chair and Representative Williams, so our team here is writing down the question. I don't have that answer right at my fingertips, but we will get right back to you. On your second question, that's where that additional data, 5 and 10 years out, my understanding is that your Board of Regents office is looking into partnering on this Census Bureau initiative, which will really give that better data about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years out.
And I would probably guess that the reason why Arkansas is not in there is because they're not part of the Midwest Higher Education Compact.
Well, that's, Mr. Chair and Representative Williams, that's correct. They're not part of our compact. They're part of the Southern Regional Education Board.
All right. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So also, when we're looking at the slide on page 12 and we compare that lower slide with the lower slide on page 3. One is about the certificates, anything above post-secondary certificate or higher. Kansas is doing really well. But then you turn over to page 12 and you look at the higher education and we see a decline. I think that this can actually be a very good thing, that not everyone is spending $24,000 at a higher education, getting, for example, a political science degree. Instead, they're getting a certificate for welding or computer technology or cybersecurity. And I think that's a good thing. Is there a way to somehow combine that data or relate that data to demonstrate that Kansas is actually on the right track, and that perhaps our universities shouldn't be, you maybe need to focus on the right sizing rather than the competition for resources and funneling more and more students into higher ed, if that even makes sense.
Ms. Egard.
Mr. Chair and Representative Williams, let me understand better. You're saying, because I think my slides are numbered differently than yours, so show me which one you're talking about, if you could.
Representative Williams.
Describe it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's the second slide on page 3. Oh, okay, it looks like it's slide 6. So that's showing that our post-secondary certificates in Kansas are exceeding the national rate, which is great. We have an aviation industry, and so that's very encouraging. But then you look at slide 12, and you see that our enrollment for higher ed continues to decline. I know our community colleges, or at least in my area, continue to decline, which doesn't necessarily make sense when you consider slide 6. So when you're working with a higher ed, the universities in particular, how is that conversation? Because in reality, they're needing to right size and adjust for the different types of opportunities our students have, which is not necessarily 4-year. So what are those conversations like? And is there a way to merge those two data points?
Ms. Egard.
Mr. Chair and Representative Williams, so we were just testifying in South Dakota last week, and a similar question came up like this in the Joint Appropriations Committee. And so my understanding from their Board of Regents, because they were in the room, they said we were asked to testify on a number of strategies around the country where people are looking actually at what's our enrollment look like in this course. Should we offer this? You know, how should we avoid duplication and that sort of thing? So I have not yet met with the Board of Regents. We're meeting this afternoon a little bit later. And so that's certainly one of the questions that we'll have. But in visiting the states in the Midwest, you know, we're in a different position, for example, than many states in the South and then in the South that are growing. And so my experience is that there are a lot of conversations going on about that very thing that you're talking about, is how do you streamline, consolidate, create efficiency, and make sure that you're focusing broadly on the credentials across the board, from certificates all the way up to, you know.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then the last and final question, and of course it can be deferred to our higher ed chair at the appropriate time when he presents our budget. But I see that you provided information on slide 13 about tuition, inflation, and that we had lowered our tuition rates in 23-24. But do you also collect data to show the state comparisons of how much investment of state general fund money or other resources of money, such as state institute building funds, are going in, so we could get an idea how much is Kansas spending on higher education compared to our neighboring states in this MHEC? Thank you.
Ms. Egard.
Mr. Chair, Representative Williams, yes. So what we did, you know, we tried not to drown you in slides, which is the tendency of us because we love to provide information. But this was really standing in the shoes of the consumer, the student, and showing kind of what the cost is. But certainly we do have data that show the appropriations levels in various states so that you can compare and contrast. We have that data.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And only one final statement. I know that from for example, county, we often talk about the consumer, which is the student, and their rate to go to that community college is very low. But actually, that's not exactly true, because as a taxpayer, my property taxes are significantly higher than my neighboring counties to make that possible. So I feel like yes, the consumer may be lower, but it actually may be substantially higher because of the amount that we put in. And I feel like a really good way to understand the cost per pupil is for us to take into account not only their investment, but our investment into that college. And I would love to see more of that in the future. Thank you.
Ms. Egard.
Mr. Chair and Representative Williams, so that's a great point, because across the country, and like in Minnesota, for example, the system there was merged, and there is no longer a local component, taxpayer component. There's a state commitment by taxpayers, but there's not the local, so it really varies across the region. Many states, some states, Illinois still has a local commitment, but many states have eliminated that, so it really varies greatly, but that's a great point. I think looking at the commitment and the cost from a variety of different perspectives is really important to do. Thank you for that question.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may have a question, but I just want to make the comment. I am really honored to serve as the chair of the Midwestern Higher Education Compact this year. And I have been on MEC for several years. And as you can see, there's several people in this room that are on it or have been on as a commissioner. Also, we have like 60 commissioners and the alternates from those 12 states. And, we pride ourselves, I think, with Midwestern Higher Education Compact in looking at areas that do not have insurance available. And I'll use an example of K-State because we are in the compact when they had the catastrophic damage done to their libraries and everything else. It was MEC that covered those multi-million dollars in order to restore K-State back to the level it was. When we had trouble with our health care in our schools and our universities, we came up with a better situation for it, and it's thriving at this point. So we go in areas that are probably unusual that other people don't really want to insure. But at the same time, with the commissioners representing all of the states, it's apparent that the big deal is to have cost savings, provide multiple opportunities, and a wise investment. So I think with some of the questions you asked, I think Representative Williams, they fit in many ways. And we can provide those opportunities out there for people, but at the same time, publicize the value of higher education and why it's not just college, but it's in all those other areas that they can be profitable, because parents want to know, are you going to get a job? But at the same time, those are areas that are needed in our economy. So I am really proud of what MEC does. And I think by asking questions and giving us the opportunity to show you the value of it, but also strengthen what we're offering is valuable. So thank you so much. And I do want to thank the chair and the committee as well for you being here this morning, because there's lots of things on it. And thanks, Mom.
Ms. Egard?
There was just one more thing. Thank you, Representative Ballard. We're proud to have you so involved in leadership at the Compact. Mr. Chair, one thing I did want to mention to the committee was that we also have a student health insurance program, so we're not afraid to start stuff up. We get our best ideas from the states and those who live there, and so if we find something great, we'll, test it out and then build it out. Student health insurance would be an example of that. We do that through United, but we provide an opportunity for that kind of bulk purchasing concept in the student health insurance area. So if your student's in college and they want to get insurance, we offer that. And the Board of Regents, they utilize our contract for the higher ed institutions that they work with.
All right, thank you. Committee, any further questions for Ms. Egard? All right, Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at your slide on number 12, and I see what's kind of the trending. But I think no matter how good you do, and you're doing a good job, but if you look at the last census, 80 out of 105 counties have lost people, including Shawnee. And the last data from the Allied van lines is Kansas ranked 8 for Exodus. So we've got to have a reason for these kids not only get educated, but if there's not a job here, they're not staying. So the state's kind of got to get its ship right to keep this state more business friendly. But you've got a tough road to hoe there.
Ms. Egard.
Mr. Chair and Representative Corbett, is that correct? I couldn't agree more. You know, that's a conversation that we're hearing in most of the Midwestern states, concerns about that. I love that the data comes from the van lines. You know, that's where the rubber literally meets the road, right? But I think there are some promising strategies. There's not time to talk about all those, but there are some promising approaches that are being taken, across the region to try to figure out not only how do you get students to stay, but how do you get them to return. I know I returned to Minnesota like 3 times, and then I stayed ultimately, but my family was there. I have a ton of cousins there. I got a good job, and that sort of thing. So there are various things that attract people back home, right, and cause them to want to stay. But it is a trend that we're seeing across the Midwest, and I'm hopeful we can turn it around.
Any further questions or comments for Ms. Heegard? All right, see none.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you for being here, and I wait to see you in my office later
Great.
on this afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and move on to a briefing on the community colleges in the state of Kansas, and so I'd invite Heather Morgan, the Executive Director with the Kansas Association of Community College Trustees. Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I obviously have about 10 minutes to cover 19 schools, which isn't going to work really well, so I'm going to hit the high points and be happy to stand for questions at the end. The good news is community college enrollment has stabilized and is starting to increase. I will say that the Board of Regents enrollment only counts 4-credit students. On the back page of your slide, which I'll talk about in a little bit, in the last year, we've had about 10,000 additional students in non-credit training programs. So business and industry calling us directly and saying, we don't care if our workers have a certificate. We don't care if it's a 4-credit program, but we need them to be able to do this thing to be able to advance at their job and get a promotion. So the community and technical colleges are dealing with 4-credit students, but also the business and industry trend is we need them to have the skill, not necessarily the credential or the transcript. And those students are never counted in our enrollments that you see from the Kansas Board of Regents. One of the reasons that the community colleges were down so much is the low unemployment rate. Traditionally, our students are a little bit older, about 23 years of age. Those adult students are had been choosing to go to work. Now, some of the automation that's happening at our bigger employers are really requiring them to get the skills to make sure that the pieces of equipment can continue to function, and that's where we get some of that non-credit training. One of the things we're hearing from business and industry is really a lot of needs around HVAC, around automated engineering technology, around robotics and mechanics. We have 2 CDL program expansions going on, one in Johnson County, one at Seward County. Seward's actually going to run the program at Garden City as well. We have our community colleges have started partnering together so that if somebody doesn't have a program, just call your friend down the way. They'll start your program and we can figure out how to work the revenue out as we go forward because it's less expensive and more efficient to share programs and more quickly. We don't have to deal with the Board of Regents approval process, frankly. If we already have a program, we can just go down the road. We also have nursing programs that are being shared. Barton is running Pratt Community College's nursing program. Butler is running Cowley's nursing program. Again, nursing programs are very expensive. We have seen the nursing profession, less students are interested in going into nursing. We have students who are going into CNA. They generally are not staying in CNA in that workforce and getting into that LPN pipeline. And so what we're trying to do is talk with students and talk with our healthcare partners really as they're doing those practicums to make sure that work-life balance. This is a different student. I think you're going to hear that from the technical colleges too. Work-life balance is much more important to our students these days, and so the days that I'm going to work 24-hour nursing shift, that's not what our students are wanting, and so that's part of the healthcare profession concern. 80% of our students are part-time, so most of our students are working and learning. We are also getting into apprenticeships where the employer will actually hire the student and then they come to us for what they call the related training while they're actually working for that company. At the end of their apprenticeship, their 2 years, they've gotten usually a certificate or an associate's degree, and then as they progress through that apprenticeship, the employer is paying them more money. And so that's a way that our students come out debt-free. So the average student loan for a Kansas Community College student is $4,000, and only 9,000 of our 92,000 students took out a federal student loan. So that's a tremendously low student loan percentage. This is not in your testimony. I wrote it down from some other testimony I gave. We also are looking at about 10,000 of our students are getting the maximum amount of Pell Grant. That means they are really, really needy. Their family is not contributing anything. We've got about 17,000 students who are getting some sort of Pell Grant. That's federal financial aid. One other partnership that I wanted to highlight is our electric power lineman program at Pratt. It's also being run, Pratt runs the program at Coffeyville, one in Wichita, and then one in Pratt. That is the highest wage occupation that you can get at a community college. Jim from Manhattan Tech also runs that program. But we have a real need for electric power linemen. Kansas City, Kansas Community College just put in a program approval through the KBOR, long process, to get approval for really high power voltage lines. But that's an area that our energy sector really needs. On the second page of the testimony is some testimony that I shared this summer with the interim committee related to the number of high school students. So Kansas Community College, our student mix has about 25% high school students. It's a little bit more for the tech colleges, but you can see that 33,000 high school students are taking college classes. So this idea that we're not doing dual and concurrent enrollment, that we don't have Senate Bill 155, which allows for free career and technical education, is just not the case. There are a lot of high school students who are taking advantage of our courses. The next sheet talks about the economic benefit of a community college. I speak a lot about this. There is not any economic reason for a student not to attend one of our community colleges. We have the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act. There's federal financial aid. We have institutional scholarships. Price should not be a barrier to receiving a certificate, a credential, or an associate's degree. You can see that over the cost of a 2-year degree, it's about $10,000 less at a community college than if you went to a Kansas public. Unfortunately, we are facing some headwinds that are not of our own making. The federal government has redone the FAFSA application to supposedly simplify it. That has turned out to not be accurate. It may be simplified, but our students cannot get a actual determination from the federal government right now. That changed, and it was supposed to be done at the end of January. But yesterday, there was an announcement made that financial aid offices will not receive information from the federal government until March at the latest. I don't trust that they're going to stay on that schedule either, quite frankly. We cannot award a Kansas Promise Scholarship until we have a completed FAFSA with an ISR from the student. We had 1,100 Kansas students, community college students, got a Kansas Promise Scholarship last year. No person across the nation is going to know what their federal financial aid is until the federal government gets the FAFSA process worked out. Senator Marshall and I were talking about this last night. He's going to have a press conference about it tomorrow. It is a significant headwind for all of higher education if students don't know what their federal financial aid is going to be. And I just told you 17,000 of our students get some sort of Pell Grant. The Kansas Promise Scholarship is all geared off of last dollar. If you don't know what that federal aid is, you can't tell what the student's going to get. The other thing that changed about the FAFSA this year, just that will impact Kansas higher ed in general, is that they changed the income limitations. And so the U.S. Department of Education believes that there'll be about 6,200 additional Pell Grant recipients in Kansas. So that means somebody who didn't receive federal financial aid last year is likely to receive it, and 14,000 additional full Pell Grant recipients. So that means that they will get the maximum Pell Grant award from the federal government. So I wanted this committee to understand that there are some things that are outside of all of our control related to federal financial aid that really will impact students and families, and you may start hearing about it and seeing more about it after the announcement yesterday. The capital outlay funding and apprenticeship and business and industry funding we received from the legislature last year for the community and technical colleges is critical. We do not receive funding for those non-credit students. This funding has allowed us to expand in program areas that were full. We've been able to add welding machines, we've been able to add CNC routers, and be able to buy the equipment to train even more people in the most in-demand occupations in our state, which are really expensive. One of the things when I asked our colleges, do you have any good stories about apprenticeship or business and industry partnerships? Literally, a student wrote this in the middle of my slide about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I love that movie. And they thought that they were like Charlie Buckets. The apprenticeship was their golden ticket. They didn't think they could do college. They didn't think that they could go on and get any sort of higher education, but this apprenticeship allowed them to see that they could succeed. So that's often what we see at our community colleges, somebody who is a first-generation student who has no family support, who's a single mom, who's raising kids. If we get them into these programs connected with Kansas business and industry, not only are they more likely to stay in Kansas, but they're more likely to succeed in higher education. The other thing that we're seeing with apprenticeships is, again, Kansas business and industry can't wait for workforce. They need them today. So with an apprenticeship, it allows them to start working for that company, make sure it's a good fit while they're receiving that training. The last thing I want to cover before I stand for questions is really about the economic benefit of the Kansas Community College system. We did a economic analysis through MZ, which is Lightcast, who the Department of Commerce uses. It's a common company across the country. So in the 21-22 school year, we had 92,000 for-credit students in Kansas community colleges, and at that time, about 25,000 non-credit students. We had 8,600 direct employees, but those, our Kansas community colleges support roughly 100,000 jobs across the state. The economic impact is $6.7 billion. So when we talk to, our presidents talk to business and industry every day, what we hear from them is this: we have to be agile, we have to be nimble, we need to be able to change our programs quickly, and we need to customize what we're doing to meet the needs of Kansas business and industry for our students who are not going to be transferring. Roughly, we provide 70% of the technical education in the state. Most of our colleges' mix of technical education is between 40 and 60% of what we're doing is technical education. Those students are never intending to transfer on to a four-year university, but are intended to go right into the workforce, making very good wages. The other segment of our population is going to be a transfer population. They're intending to transfer to, hopefully, a Kansas private or public university and get a degree in teaching or nursing and things like that. One of the things that we would ask for your help on is continued pushing on program-to-program articulation. When our students transfer to a Kansas public institution, they lose credit hours. We have across-the-board agreement with the Kansas private colleges that if a student graduates with an associate's degree from a Kansas community college, they enter at junior standing and only have 60 hours to go to complete their degree. That's good for students, and it's good for taxpayers. It means there's not credits being lost because of the transfer process. The Board of Regents is starting now on nursing program-to-program articulation, but we're only doing about a program a year. We've got to accelerate this so students are not losing time to degree, which means they're not working, which means they're paying tuition. It's about a $75,000 economic impact if you lose a semester in transfer credit. So any pressure that you can continue to expedite program-to-program articulation with our Regents universities would be helpful. And that's what we hear from students. Students want to get in there, get the degree done, and get into the workforce. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Morgan. So going back to the program, I know when I was in high school and also attending the University of Kansas, I took courses at Barton County Community College, and they all transferred to the University of Kansas. So right now, is it by institution whether or not those hours were going to be transferred?
So there is a list of about 100 courses called the System-Wide Transfer List. And if you take a course off of that, Comp 1, Comp 2, Public Speaking, it will transfer to any public institution in Kansas. The difference between transferring and transferring into the program area means the course may transfer, but if it's not in the program area, it's an extra course. So instead of 120 hours to graduate, it might be 123 hours to graduate because that public speaking class did not meet the business communication requirement at an institution. And so what we're trying to do is what we call 2+2s. You get an associate's degree in elementary education at a Kansas community college. We have this with everyone for elementary ed. Then you do only 2 more years at the Regents institution. So it doesn't matter if the course name isn't quite right, doesn't matter if the course transfers, but it transfers into that program of study, so you're not doing extra credit hours beyond 120 to get a bachelor's degree.
All right, thank you. Representative Landwehr.
Did I understand you or perhaps misunderstood that you have to have a Pell Grant for the Promise Act, or it's just a part of that?
You have to complete the FAFSA. In order to have a completed FAFSA, you have to have what they call an ISIR. I don't know what it stands for. It's some technical financial aid thing. And until you get that ISIR, it's not a completed Pell Grant or FAFSA. And so you have to have a completed FAFSA to get the Kansas Promise Act to know what the federal government's going to give you. And if we don't have that, we can't say what your Promise Act amount is because it takes into account first the federal amount.
And then,
Ms. Landwehr.
and is that explained and everything on the website to sign up for the
Yeah,
Promise Act?
completion of the FAFSA is one of the requirements.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize, I had to step out to retrieve some folders, so hopefully I can answer like a quarter of you guys' questions later on. So I may have missed this if you said anything about it, but you guys are down in attendance, some, I don't know, I've heard different numbers. But we were in some discussion last night, and one of the issues that came up is that you're only counted once a year, and that your spring semester is a lot of times bigger because it's kids that started off in the 4 years and then, realize, hey, I need to go back down to, or go to a different route, and they go to the community college. So do you see that?
So the fall preliminary enrollment, which is the biggest press thing around enrollment in this state, is not accurate for, quite frankly, community or technical colleges for a couple reasons. One is we have second 8-week start classes because our students aren't traditional students. We have to start classes every 8 weeks so that we capture them when they're ready. So if you have any classes starting after the 20th day, which is what that count date is based off of, none of that enrollment gets counted. And so at the 20th day this year, we were up a little. But that doesn't count our second 8-week classes. So what we like to look back at is the enrollment for the whole previous year. So those second 8-week classes or those non-traditional start dates, our enrollment counts on that. And then it doesn't count any of those non-credit students as well.
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then one last thing, another discussion we had was that the pop culture, I guess, sort of kind of puts down community college. I mean, we were talking about the Big Bang Theory, and, well, Penny just went to a community college, and so what are you guys doing to try to, we can put all the money in and all these scholarships, but if that stigma is still there, it's hard to get people to realize that there are some great benefits in going to a community college.
Ms. Morgan.
Well, I'm a community college grad, and I'd love to list the number of people around this building that y'all know that I think we would consider to be successful that are community college graduates, some around this table. But the bottom line is it is a stigma. It is a narrative. And what we're trying to do is saying, listen, you don't need to have any debt to get a very good paying certificate or associate's degree to go into the workforce. And so we are trying to do that. We're trying to do that with some marketing. I don't watch the Big Bang Theory, but I'm sure there are other places that are talking about this too in pop culture, and we're really trying to work on that so students understand the benefit. And I'm a community college graduate because my parents said I was going to be a community college graduate because their parents said they were going to be a community college graduate because we couldn't afford to go to a 4-year institution until you go the cheaper route. And so we are seeing less and less of that, but as more students, especially in the Hispanic culture, are anti-student debt, we're seeing that people are choosing community college somewhat because of it's less expensive and they're place-bound.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we look at the operational budget for all of our 19 community colleges in 18 counties, it's $381 million. The amount that's funded by those local taxpayers in high property tax is what? Is it 265, 270 million?
About 303.
$303 million. So basically, when we look at that, the taxpayer advantage is about $2.20 per every dollar spent. Let's please remember that 18 counties are carrying $300 million in property tax. So when we're talking about property tax reduction in the state capital, just remember there are 18 that are paying the freight for everybody else. So with that question, has there been any effort from your community college presidents to change the funding formula so that it's not dependent on property tax, such as the other states have that we just heard our former speaker speak on?
Ms. Morgan.
Yeah, so just so everybody understands, about 34% of our money is coming from the local property taxpayers, only about 19% from the state. So again, property taxpayers are paying more. We have talked with the Senate President, as you well know, and others related to this issue. We've not come to a good solution, but I think that what we are trying to do, and I can tell you at least one, Garden City Community College got their capital outlay money last year, and every bit of it went to levy reduction. So there are some that are realizing my property taxes in Vinnie County have been higher for decades, frankly. And so when new money came from the state last year, they took that all and put it directly back to the property taxpayers. And so I think our locally elected boards are looking at that and really trying to hold the mill levies as low as possible because of that issue. We do get 2/3 state funding for out-district students, which theoretically makes up a difference, but if you live in one of those 18 counties, and I'm from one of those 18 counties, it's an issue.
Representative Williams.
I would just ask for that board to look closely at looking at other states that have changed the way that they do the distribution, because I think it's absolutely unfair. There's no parity in Butler County paying for Sedgwick County students that drive 1 mile across the border, and we pay 20% higher taxes, and it's mostly because of our community college. That's $303 million. So it's a crazy system here in Kansas, and I would love to have the board presidents be more proactive in making changes.
Thank you.
Ms. Morgan, do you have any comments on that? Or?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Representative Ballard.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vice Chair Hoffman was referring, when he said last night to our conversation, to the Midwestern Higher Education dinner that we had, which was over 20 people, and we had a very dynamic conversation. In fact, they could have come here this morning and finished it. But one of the things that the community colleges talked about was declining enrollment in some areas, and you guys have been talking about the stigma attached. But the question I have is, when you talk about transfers of classes and getting credit for it, and how they may have it listed, sometimes how it's listed doesn't really fit with what that category might be. Do you ever meet with Board of Regents or with presidents of our 6 universities in Washburn to get some consistency in terms of what will credit? Because when I see it at the University of Kansas where I work, sometimes that course does not by name really put it in the right category, and you don't know where to place it. And it becomes very complicated, not because they don't want to transfer it, but because the description doesn't fit that category that you have.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wasn't invited to the dinner last night, but I had many texts during the dinner, I must say, from people there asking questions and what I would say. So I don't know what was said last night, but the bottom line is, in terms of program-to-program articulation and course transfer, we do have the Transfer and Articulation Council, which meets with, it's the provosts of the universities, and our academic officers meet together to try to make sure that the courses that are on the system-wide transfer list are aligned. We actually are working with President Mason at Fort Hays, and who is very open to program articulation, to say, let's forget this. If we can't get all 6 together, let's go with 1 to make it more easy for our students to transfer to that university. So we do meet with them. We meet with them frequently. We've met with K-State. We've met with Fort Hays multiple times. We just had a nursing partnership signing a few weeks ago. So we are trying to do that, but you've hit the nail on the head. It comes down to a dean that's making that transfer decision if that course is going to transfer or not.
Representative Ballard.
And the only comment I would say is that, often it looks as if one is pitted against the other. To me, that makes absolutely no sense at all.
Yep.
Because you're both on the same mission.
Yep.
And the students become the pawn.
Yes.
In many ways. So I think whatever we can do in terms of looking at the value of community colleges and going on to another 4-year, or not going on and taking your job. It should be as a mission and not a competition.
Right, and if we need to change something, one little thing, so that the university says this fulfills this requirement, that's what we need to know, because to your point, this is about students and doing whatever both sides need to do to make sure that student doesn't lose that credit and transfer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 questions. You mentioned the lineman degree or certificate, and that's the highest paid certificate or degree that you can get at a community college. And then you turned around and said that you're trying to expand that program in other community colleges. However, the Board of Regents is slow to make decisions. And we see that a lot. So when the county, or when your community college works with a business, and a business needs to pay for certain training, you're very responsive. And now you've identified another degree that would be very beneficial to the public. However, the Board of Regents is standing in the way. What typically is the issue with that? Why does it take so long?
Ms.
Well,
Morgan.
that's a long question, but first of all, you have to submit your program materials for a new, because we consider a new program at a college. If the college doesn't have it, it's a new program at the college. You have to submit all your materials. They have to go through the workforce development staff at the Kansas Board of Regents. They have time to review it back and forth. This program, this course doesn't meet the requirement, blah, blah, blah. We go back and forth, back and forth. Then it has to be approved by the Kansas Technical Education Authority. If it doesn't get approved that month, then that's a whole nother month. They only meet once a month. Then the TEA recommends positive funding or positive approval to the Kansas Board of Regents. So there is a lengthy process. One of our presidents was working with B&W Trailer Hitch on a program, and he came from Arizona, said he could get the program to market in Arizona in a month. Here it's been taking many more months than one or two to get that program approved. So it's just a process. It's a process issue. It doesn't go necessarily as smoothly as business would want, because when they come to us, they need something tomorrow, not 3-6 months from now.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Workforce development is a big issue in the state of Kansas, and we need to figure out a more efficient way to get these the curriculum through. My second question is on the Kansas Promise Act. You mentioned that earlier, and Representative Landwehr went down the same road. However, the Promise Act, we know who's going to qualify for it, and we know what programs are going to qualify for it. So we can give these students some sort of assurance that they will be able to go to college next year, but we're just waiting on the FAFSA program to
Let me clarify that. So if you're studying in one of the high demand programs, physical or mental health care, early childhood, elementary education, advanced manufacturing, or IT, those are the programs, we'll know that you're in a program that qualifies. But until we know if they get a full Pell Grant, they will not qualify for the Kansas Promise Scholarship, because they will have all of their expenses covered by the Pell Grant. So we can't tell them that they'll do that, and we don't really know if they're going to qualify for a full Pell Grant until we get the information from the federal government. So we could say, well, based upon this program, you should be, if there is unmet costs, but we also have a cap of $10 million on the Promise Act, and we're getting kind of close to that. So it's very difficult for us to promise something to a student without having that federal information.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that was kind of my point, was we know that they could qualify for it, but if they get a federal grant, it pays all the expenses. And that was the whole idea, or one of the ideas of the program, was to get them to fill that out, and then they could realize that they do qualify to go to school. So we could still give them assurance that, yes, you'll be able to go here next year, you'll be able to be in this program, but if federal dollars pay for it, they'll pay for it. If not, we'll help you.
We can give, not an assurance, but we think that this is what's going to happen. But we couldn't give an assurance until we saw what the federal government really says.
All right, thank you.
Committee, any further questions for Ms. Morgan? Representative Carlin.
Mr. Chair, Heather, I'm not sure we all understand this, and I'm not sure I do, but when someone from another county comes to my county where my community college is, talk to me about the money. I think that's an issue that I don't know, I think it's a problem, and it's why you might need to have linemen training in or something else in every area. Thank you.
Well, Manhattan Technical College would not like to be called a community college, I'm pretty sure, which is in your county. Yeah. Oh, okay. We're going to go with Pratt County. If you're a student from Pratt County going to Pratt Community College, the state pays 1/3 of a rate determined by the Board of Regents. There's about 17 different rates. I was hoping not to get into this today. But anyway, just 1/3. The state pays 1/3. If the student from Kingman County comes to Pratt Community College, the state pays 2/3. The idea is the local property taxpayers are paying 1/3 of the other third of the Pratt student. So Pratt County taxpayers 1/3, Pratt County student 1/3, and then the state 1/3. For Kingman County, the state's paying 2/3, and the students paying the Kingman County students paying the other third. That's generally how it works for community colleges. For technical colleges, they get 2/3 state funding for all students because they don't have property taxing authority.
Representative Ballard.
I will make this quick. You just said something
Thank you.
but how does work study work into this? Because we were talking about all this, but then we haven't said anything about work study, because that's the other piece of we cannot give you enough financial aid, so therefore we give you an advantage to get a job on campus, and the federal government pays so much, and then the university pays.
Well, that's another complication about this whole FAFSA thing, is if we don't know what they're getting in their aid package, we don't know who to give a work study to first, who is most needy. So it's one of those other complications. We do have work study. You pay the student to be the secretary rather than paying the secretary to answer the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to complicate it a little bit.
Representative Landwehr, last question.
So for some of these kids that don't have, you know, the knowledge on this or the assistance from some, in the world do they take and travel through this?
So we were
Maze
doing,
of
yeah,
mess.
before yesterday, I think we were all a little more optimistic, frankly. We've been doing FAFSA events, talking about the simplified FAFSA. It's supposed to be easier for students, but students still need a whole lot of help to get through it. Now, we can still help them get the application in, but now it's going to be, I'm sorry you thought it was going to be next week that you're going to find out. Now it's going to be the end of March. And so it's really about holding on to those students. We're dealing with students who have a lot of barriers. The students you love, you know, foster care kids, first generation kids, kids in poverty, kids with mental health issues. I say kids, students. It is difficult to help those people understand this very complex system that many of us in this room can't even understand. So it's challenging.
But how do they know who to I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, how do they know who to reach out to? And the reason I ask that, because I know a couple students going through this right now, and I'm like, they're lost.
If they know where they're going, they should reach out to the financial aid office of the college they're going to go to. If they don't know where they're going, I would encourage them to reach out to the places that they are considering. The financial aid offices are probably in the best position to advise appropriately what that student should do next to be prepared when they finally do get that federal determination.
So if it's a CC, that's who they should reach out to.
Yes. And if they don't get a response, you tell them to call me and I'll make sure that they get taken care of.
All right, thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Morgan, for being here this morning. We do need to move on to the briefing on the technical colleges, and I apologize, you have about 10 to 15 minutes so we can get into our budget presentations. So I would invite Jim Gannott, the president of Manhattan Technical College, and on behalf of the Kansas Association of Technical Colleges. Mr. Gannott.
Good morning. How you doing? You have my testimony. I'm going to hit some high points and also address some of the questions you raised from the tech college perspective. You know, growing up in South Dakota, which I call the true South, and please know in my previous academic career I taught the American Civil War at Southern Arkansas University. But I would sit with my parents, they would watch Billy Graham broadcasts on TV, and they always started out with those things with, let me tell you about the good news of Jesus. Well, I'm going to tell you the good news of public higher education in the state, and it's your tech colleges. Okay, there are 7 of us. Flint Hills Tech, Manhattan Tech, North Central Kansas Tech at Beloit, Northwest Kansas Tech Goodland, Salina Tech, Wichita State Tech, and Washburn Institute of Technology. Okay? We do not have local taxing authority. None of us. Okay? As Heather mentioned, 2/3 of our funding on the tiered and non-tiered with the state makes up for that. So all of our students are in district, if you will. Our enrollment growth has been steady. It's been phenomenal if you look at the K-Board data. Last fall, and again, that's a snapshot of enrollment, but we grew by 9%. Over the last 5 years, we've grown by almost 20%. Over the last decade, enrollment in the tech colleges has grown by 70%. I've been involved in a lot of meetings in the last year about Gen Z and the new gen, which is Gen Alpha, and they love tech ed. It's hands-on. The other good thing is they realize I can learn to be a nurse, a welder, fix cars, be a lineman. I'm making money. I don't have student debt. But from our perspective to you, you should know that the tech college graduates, almost 80% statewide, stay in the state. I lead the way at 86% of my graduates stay. So they're not just employees, they're taxpayers and they're consumers. And they're filling essential jobs. We concentrate across the spectrum, and even the community colleges with tech programs. Our mission on this is high-wage, high-demand jobs or critical need jobs, such as CNAs and EMTs. One of the issues with our enrollment limitations, if you will, is capacity. Representative Carlin is one of my reps, and she came up to me before the meeting and said, we're the 2nd smallest tech college in the state? And I said, yeah, we are. We grew 5% last year at Manhattan Tech, but I'm out of room. And I'm going to tell you in a little bit, thanks to Representative Howe, thanks to all of you, you provided the tech colleges with a big boost this fiscal year, and it's going to help me to have more than 250% more enrollment capacity. All of our tech programs have advisory committees. Those are made up of local and regional employers. We call them program advisory committees or business industry leadership teams. They give us feedback. They're not just a yes group. They tell our teachers, here's what I need you to teach to our students as they enter the workforce. So we get direct feedback from them. Almost every tech college program will lead to an industry-recognized credential or licensure. That validates the fact that we taught them right. One of our closest success stories I want to tell you about from Manhattan Tech is we're in a partnership with Michelin at Junction City. They're going to make the tread tires there for agriculture. They have a program called Michelin Tech Scholars. So they look out at two-year college students to take a test. And if you pass the test, Michelin hangs a little carrot out here for you. This is my first year of offering an industrial engineering tech program. I've got 8 students in it. 3 of the 8 passed the Michelin test, one with the highest score Michelin's ever seen. The students are then guaranteed a 20-hour-a-week job, and Michelin pays their full tuition and fees. The student does not have to promise to work for Michelin afterwards. We're seeing more and more of this kind of carrot approach from a lot of businesses. And that's why our employer engagement with our programs to get the employers engaged with our teachers and with the students early on leads to those connections. We're very successful academically. On page 2 of the testimony, you'll see that several of our tech colleges, of the 7, 5 had the highest graduation rates in the nation, in the top 25. The Aspen Institute every other year runs the top 150 excellence competition for 2-year colleges. In Kansas, 7 2-year colleges were identified by Aspen to be eligible. 5 of the 7 are tech colleges. One of the issues we have, even though we have a higher than average success rate with students on graduation and job placement, is the fact that when our students do their internship, a practicum, on-the-job training, clinical experience, they often get a job offer. Heather mentioned I have a lineman program. It starts in January, ends in December. In the summer, they work with a power company. We usually get 5 to 6 calls back from the student and the company before the end of summer saying, hey, I want to keep this kid. How can he finish the program? Now, the traditional federal and state structure would say I have a non-completer. But finally, this year, IPEDS, the Federal Warehouse for Higher Ed Data, noted that if a student gets the skills they need and goes into a job without finishing the program, it's a success. My electric lineman students' average starting pay is between $65,000 and $80,000 with a 1-year college certificate. We do a lot of things, as the data will show, the graphs I have in the testimony from KBOR, short-term and intermediate certificates more than associate degrees. The employers want to see the skills, the students learn the skills, they have the credential, job offer. We can't turn them out fast enough. Some of the issues, we talked a lot about the FAFSA, but some of the issues from my perspective for your consideration is the whole structure of federal financial aid, GI Bill benefits, does not allow us to accelerate students through the pipeline when they're capable of accelerating. That's why we're turning more and more to internships, practicums, and apprenticeships, because almost every tech college and community college with tech programs probably has 5 to 10% of that tech college student enrollment that could accelerate. They don't have to wait the whole semester to move on. But again, the federal structure of things kind of works against that. So we're successful with graduation, job placement, keeping them in the state earnings. This current fiscal year, we were the beneficiaries from the tech colleges of what we call a base operating grant from the legislature. Each tech college got $1.5 million unrestricted funds. When we worked with Representative Howe's committee on that, they wanted to see where's your local skin in the game. And I'm happy to report every one of our partners among the tech colleges has seen an increase in donations, both cash and in kind, due to both the ARPA allotment we received and this base operating grant. For example, we don't have taxing authority, but the city of Manhattan voted in December to give Manhattan Tech $200,000 a year over 5 years, $1 million for our new building project because it's economic development and it's jobs. I've had 8 individual donors give 6-digit gifts for our project because it will expand enrollment in construction, HVAC, plumbing, industrial engineering tech, electric linemen, and biomanufacturing. My story is, it goes across all 7 tech colleges. So we hope that that base operating grant could become seen as a high impact investment from the legislature. Again, we don't have that local taxing authority. What we turn out is return on investment. For every dollar we get budgeted, our return on investment is closing in on 15 to 1. Now, if you could get that with your stock market, you'd be doing real well. Our students stay in the areas. If you go to almost any clinic in the Manhattan area, the clinic personnel probably came from Manhattan Tech. If you have to take your car into Briggs or Burnett Automotive, the mechanic probably came through us. We keep the world working, but increasingly we're being asked to work on emerging new-collar occupations, biomanufacturing, industrial engineering tech, automated engineering. So again, that investment from you, all of you, with that base operating grant, high impact fund, allows us to move forward with that. We do run like a business with the tech colleges. And this is a little jab at my colleagues with the universities because many of you have been involved in this issue. Every one of our tech colleges have shut programs down. Low enrollment, lack of industry support, lack of being relevant. And then we start up programs that are needed. So we do run like a business. Representative Williams mentioned about right sizing with universities. I think if you look at tech colleges, we made that a long time ago with our narrower focus. But we need resources to keep growing and extending that capacity. One of the Regent's goals in the entire system this year is applied learning. Well, tech colleges have done that forever. That's why one of the reasons our enrollment increases every year. We're taking Gen Z and Gen Alpha and they're hands-on. Now, I'm an old liberal arts guy, okay? I've got a PhD in public policy and administration. My dad was the 8th grade dropout all-purpose handyman. You put a tool in my hand, call 911. But the kids these days, I say kids, 30 and younger in particular, they want to play right away with the technology. And that's what the tech colleges do. We work with them and we say, we want you to fail so you will learn why you need to do it this way. So some of the experiments that go on in our labs are quite entertaining with HVAC and pressure. But that's how they learn. It also leads to more and more word-of-mouth marketing and advertising for us. The enrollment with an Excel and CTE has boomed with the tech colleges. Recently, there's been quite a bit of debate about do we need more bachelor's degree recipients or less? The answer is neither. We need more skilled people. And I think the tech colleges are in a position, because we don't have taxing authority, we have the least amount of governance in the way, to work with you and be almost the guinea pigs, the pilot, to keep trying new and innovative ways. Literally, if you came up to me today with something we need to try to do at Manhattan Tech, I can call a board meeting by Zoom tonight, get the vote, and we're taking action tomorrow. We don't have a lot of committees in the way. And again, that's one of the reasons we lead back to pretty strong return on investment. So I would ask you to please look through the testimony. You'll see on the last page some of the things we're working on due to the investments you've made. If you come through Manhattan anytime soon, come by our campus. Our new building will be done in April. We'll be in it in the fall, 47,000 square feet that you help pay for. But that's what we're after. We need that facility space, equipment, and investment to go after the teachers we need with those skills. You can make a lot more money as a nurse in a hospital than you can teaching nursing. So we work with other ways to do it. We have more time off for them than they do in the hospital. But we have very skilled people that pass those skills on to our students. And someday they're all going to take care of us in a clinic or hospital. So thank you, Tech College. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Jim. Committee, are there any questions for Jim? All right, seeing none, thank you for being here.
I hope that's a good
We look
sign.
forward to the opening of the new building.
Please come by.
All right, thank you. All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and move on to the budget report outs. And so I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Hoffman with the general government budget. And I believe he's going to start with the budget for the Kansas Board of Hearing Aid Examiners. Riveting information. Chairman Hoffman.
Yes, it's riveting. Yeah, Board of Hearing Aid Examiners. Agency requests a revised estimate of $42,695, all from their fee fund. That's the same amount as the 23 legislature as we put in. Governor concurred, and the Budget Committee concurred. Moving on to 25. The agency again requested $42,695, all from their fee fund. That's the same amount as approved by the 23 legislature and estimated for fiscal year 25. Governor recommended, and the board concurred.
Committee, any questions for Chairman Hoffman? All right, seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
I move the adoption of the Kansas Board of Hearing Aid Examiners 24 and 25.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? second by Representative Turk. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Hoffman.
All right, we'll go to the lottery. Should have these in order. I'm not finding my lottery deal here. There it is, okay. Okay, the agency submitted a revised estimate of 466 million, all from special revenue funds, and 95 FTEs for 24. That's a decrease of 9 million or 1.9% below the 24 approved. The revised estimate is supplemental funding of 200,000, all from the Lottery Operations Fund for increased contractual expenditures related to production and placement costs for lottery advertising. It also includes a base decrease of 9 million for the gaming facility managers' contracts and 369 for the aid to local units of government. These reductions are to reduce expanded gaming estimates. Majority of the reduction is estimates for the South Central or the Kansas Star Casino and Southeast, which is the Kansas Crossing Casino gaming zones. The governor recommended expenditures of 466.2 million, all from special revenue funds. That's a decrease of 402,352 below the agency's revised estimate. The recommendation deletes 402,352 or 5% of salary as wages reduced and reduces the funding for vacant positions to more accurately reflect the agency's actual expenditures. And the budget concurred with the governor's recommendation.
Committee, any questions in regards to fiscal year 2024? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right. It's been a little while, so I just want to double check and make sure that my memory is working this the correct way. The reduction of 9 million just means that less came in from those gaming facilities than we expected. Is that correct?
Chairman Hoffman.
Yes, that's correct. You know, they always estimate how much gaming's going to happen, and this is a revised estimate accordingly to what they're seeing in those different ones. And I have, you know, what each one of them is doing. They're all starting to come back to pre-COVID numbers.
Excellent. Okay. And if I could continue with just one more here.
You may.
The 402,000 reduction of 5%, were we really funding $400,000 extra in empty positions?
Yeah,
Chairman
so my understanding is that it is vacant positions, just like a lot of agencies have shrinkage, but they have, I guess they had more shrinkage than normal, and so the governor reduced that amount. So yes.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much.
Any further questions in regards to fiscal year 2024? All right, seeing none. Chairman Hoffman, you may move on to fiscal year 2025.
All right, for 2025, agency requests 479.4 million from special revenue funds. That's an increase of 12.8 million above the 24 estimate. That does not include any major adjustments to the 24 revised estimate. There are increases in a variety of categories of expenditures, including increased salaries and wages in the amount of 828,647. That is 443,884 for a 5% agency-wide salary adjustment and 402,252 for employee bonuses. It also includes 100.8 million for sports wagering receipts fund for management fees that are based on 90% of the net sports wagering revenue. This is a 10.8 million increase above the agency's 24 estimate. And then they're requesting 250,000, all from special revenue funds, for passenger vehicles. That's an increase of 108,000 above the 24. Agency had planned to buy 5 vehicles, but they're only going to buy 4 because basically, even for our state contracts, those are going up quite a bit. So it's costing about 45,000 for per vehicle instead of, you know, I don't know what it was before, but that's up probably more around 30,000 is what they used to be. So they're only going to buy 4 instead of 5. The governor recommended expenditures of $478.8 million for fiscal year 25. She deleted the salary increase of 5% because she, as you know, has a 5% increase in her budget statewide, so she decreased this one. She kept in the $402,000 for bonuses. And what that bonus is, from what I understand, is that if we meet certain criteria in the gaming and lottery, they give bonuses to the employees for making those certain steps, from what I understand. And then there was also she deleted again $443,884 to reduce funding for vacant positions. And of course, that would be the same positions as in in 24. So we concurred with the governor's recommendation.
All right, thank you, Chairman Hoffman. Any questions in regards to fiscal year 2025? Seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
Okay, I move the adoption of the Kansas Lottery's budget for fiscal year 24 and 25.
Committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Representative Turk. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Hoffman.
All right, we're going to go racing and gaming. Racing and Gaming Commission requests a revised estimate of $11.6 million, all from special revenue funds and expenditures, 120.5 FT positions in 24. That's an increase of 869,000 or 8%, and 13 FT positions above the 24 approved amount. The revised estimate included $929,000 in supplemental funding for the regulation of historical horse racing machines at a parimutuel facility in Sedgwick County for fiscal year 24. This includes expenditure of 13 FT positions, database fees, firewall security and server, computer stations, and fingerprinting system supplies and travel. The governor concurred with the agency's revised estimate of $11.6 million, all from special revenue fund, and 120.5 FT positions in 24. The budget committee concurred, but we did take out the 920,873 and the 13 FT positions for the parimutuel facility. The reason we took this out is because there's no way they're going to have that facility up and going in 24, in fiscal year 24. So these positions are not needed in 24 for sure. And then you'll see in 25 we made some changes due to the facility possibly being ready by next year. So I'll stand for questions.
I guess this might be a discussion more for fiscal year 2025, but when is that facility supposed to be operating for the historic horse racing facility?
I'm trying to remember, but I think it's by the end of 25, I believe. So I think it's about a year from now is when they're expecting.
So actually, we would be in fiscal year 2026 when that facility opens.
Yes, possibly, or at least the first part. I mean, if it's earlier, we might be getting close to the fiscal year 24, but it's probably going to be fiscal year 26.
Thank you, Chairman Hoffman. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this might just be a phrasing issue on the summary, but $920,000 was for the regulation of, or was that for the purchase of the machines?
No,
Chairman Hoffman.
That's for the regulations. So, this is one of those issues where we passed a law and they've got to regulate it. So they have people in all of the existing casinos that that are floor managers that regulate. They're estimating for this particular facility that they're going to need 13 FTEs for that. And so, frankly, eventually, we're going to have to put in FTEs for this. They're going to have to hire people because they've got to regulate that facility.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may not be familiar with what regulate means then in this case, if it's taking 13 people in one facility to regulate a machine or a series of machines.
Well, they're floor managers. I mean, they're making sure that all of the laws are being followed and it's fair, you know, for the, and it's also shift work. I mean, so not all 13 are on the floor at the same time. They have to have shifts, you know, for different ones. So personally, I think 13 might be a little much, but they're telling me that that's comparable to what they have in every one of our casinos, and that this particular facility will be just as big as any of our other facilities as far as machines.
The one thing that I would also, and maybe we need to have more analysis on how many individuals or regulators there needs to be on this particular gaming facility, is because it's different than the casinos that we have throughout the state, because you have the electronic machines, but then you also have table games, and it's a little bit different because this is all going to be electronic gaming machines, and I don't know if we need the same amount of individuals regulating the floor that you have in the casinos as opposed to a facility that's just going to be all completely electronic gaming devices.
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
I would also agree with that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any further questions in regards to fiscal year 2024 for the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission? Representative Corbett.
Just to find out, is this a 24-hour operation? Is it open all 24 hours a day around the clock?
I would assume that they are going to be open 24-hour. I'm not sure about that. Frankly, the facility's not been built. You know, it's not ready to go yet, so we didn't get into a lot of, you know, the particulars, because I think we're still a year out of really getting in those particulars.
Any further questions for Chairman Hoffman? All right, seeing none, you move on to fiscal year 2025.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agency requested $12 million, all from special revenue funds, and 120.5 FT positions. This is an increase of 421,000 above the 24 estimate. It includes 1.4 million in enhancement funding for the regulation of historical horse racing machines at a parimutuel facility in Sedgwick County. Includes the same 13 FT positions and all that goes with it. The governor concurred again with the 12 million and the 120.5 FT positions. The budget committee did not, we did not take that totally out, but we also did not give them all. Part of the reason is they did tell us that these are not positions that they can just hire, you know, fairly quick. It does take some training and to find people to hire, so they need 6 months to a year to really start the process. So we deleted 865,637 and 7 FTE positions to partially fund their request. And we specifically put in one FTE for their agent in charge, and then 5 FTE positions for enforcement agents in those positions. That was what we did because of testimony that they felt like they need to start the process of trying to hire these people. But we can have a discussion, I guess.
We'll have discussion.
Yes.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do they have any open positions, or are their FTEs 100% full already?
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, they don't have any. They don't have enough of open positions for this. We asked about that, and well, yeah, no, they don't.
Representative Owens.
Just out of curiosity, how many agents do they have on the floor at the Kansas Star Casino?
Approximately the same.
So they anticipate this to be as large of an operation as the Kansas Star Casino?
Yeah, and that was what I talked to him about, was that, you know, for what the same reasons why the chairman just mentioned, that this is different. They're saying there's going to be more machines at this facility than at most casinos. That makes up the difference of the tables. I just think that there probably needs to be more discussion on exactly what this is going to look like when it's built. But I do think that they probably need to maybe start the process of looking and trying to hire people in fiscal year 25.
Thank you.
Any further discussion in regards to fiscal year 2025? All right, seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move the adoption of the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission for fiscal year 24 and 25.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Turk. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Hoffman.
All right, this agency requested a revised estimate of $123.7 million, including $16.7 million SGF and 1,049.2 FT positions in 24. The revised estimate is an all funds decrease of $3.2 million below the approved amount in 23. It's primarily attributed to the agency utilizing some of the funds available for the replacement of license plates for 2025 due to projections. And basically, they didn't get it all done in 24 or 23, so 24, so they're going to move it to 25. Yeah, and I don't know why they didn't. I wouldn't have any idea. It seems like there might have been an issue with the tag design. But so the governor concurred with the agency's 24 estimate, and the budget committee did concur. We did look at some vacant FTE positions, so the committee deleted 10 vacant FTE positions in 24. I will say on the tag, we did talk a little bit about the tag situation. I'm a little frustrated about the whole tag situation, which I think a lot of people probably are. But my understanding is that they are not going to start production of the new design tag until sometime in like October or September. And in the meantime, they're going to still replace the tags, but they're going to replace the tags with the blue background, the blue with the seal background. I asked them, are we then going to go back and replace those? And they said, oh, no, those will stay until replacements. I'm not sure why we don't just carry on with that same one, but that's neither here nor there.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't actually care all that much, but I am curious with our new process for the production of license plates. We're not stamping them in prison anymore. These things are printed off and they're stickers, basically. What's the holdup? Why are they waiting until October?
Chairman Hoffman.
I have no idea. And yeah, the chair of transportation might have a little bit better idea on that, but I don't understand either why you would think that they would have the material to design whatever. It's a computer and print it off.
file.
But anyway.
Representative Sutton.
I was just going to say, it's a PDF file for crying out. They can switch it out immediately.
You would think.
Chairman Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we had a little discussion about that also with the Department of Revenue. And even though it is like what you're saying, there's a sheeting that has certain primary colors in the background that they have to do that. And so they've got to get that sheeting here so that they can print them off. No, they've got to get it ordered and shipped. As a matter of fact, there may be a little sheeting that's already there under the old plate design that we're going to have to find some use for.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so on the 10 deleted FTEs, since there's not a corresponding decrease in their budget, those were not funded positions.
Representative Hoffman.
No, they may be funded, but they just were vacant.
If they're funded, why don't we see a decrease in the overall?
Because we didn't go into how much each one of them cost. We just, the motion was to delete 10 FTE positions.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But wouldn't that make one conclude that the money for those positions is still there and then it's going to be just transferred to other usages? And if so, we should probably delete the associated money. And then secondly, in the FTE positions, we see this 1,049. So then on the next year when we get there, would we then see a decrease to 1,039? And then secondly to that, when we look at these FTEs for this particular agency, are those the total number of FTEs that they try to fill at any one time? Or is it just a safety slot of positions that they may or may not?
Chairman Hoffman.
So I think eventually we're going to have a broader discussion in appropriations on FTEs. So I talked to Dylan about, these 10 FTEs because one of my fear is when we deleted the analysts from revenue, first thing they said was, well, we're going to have to delete, we're just not going to fill driver's license positions if you do this. Well, that's because, I'll just be brutally honest, that's because that's what affects us the most and gets our attention the most, gets the people's attention the most. And it frustrates me that was their answer. They have 40 vacant positions, but of course that goes back and up and down. I wanted to make a motion possibly to say, no, you can't take it out of these particular divisions, but frankly, it really doesn't matter. We can make all the motions we want as far as FTEs are concerned. As long as they have the money in their budget, they can create as many FTEs, they can hire as many people as they want. And so it really doesn't matter. This 10 positions really doesn't matter. Now, if you want to get in and delete the amount of money for each of these 10 positions, it's going to take a little bit because you're going to have to get in, you have to decide what do they need, what do they don't need. We take this amount of money out, and I'm not sure that we have the time to do that or the expertise to do that.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think that if we're serious about cutting overall state budget, then we need to at least make an effort to make a reduction, even if it's a few $1,000,000. And then also, I think that to your answer and to respond to that concern that they always target those constituent services, that we actually put some type of proviso or that it cannot be positions that have a direct relationship or direct contact with our constituents is through constituent services. So I'm just wondering how we can make this a meaningful delete versus an unmeaningful one.
Chairman Hoffman.
I think we possibly could do a proviso that would maybe direct them. But again, I'm not sure it'll make a lot of difference, but.
And I will say that we're going to have a discussion with Dylan giving us an update on exactly the ramifications of the deletion of FTEs and what we can and cannot do in regards to that, which I would say we're control of the money, so we actually have a lot of control of what happens with the FTEs. I would probably say we need to be more specific if we're going to have a proviso that says, you cannot delete any positions that would inhibit any type of constituent services, because they'll say all of our positions have some type of constituent services that goes on throughout the state of Kansas. I do agree with the chairman. Most likely they're going to probably target the remote driver's license offices. And if that would have effect on especially the rural part of the state, which I would like to have language that would tighten that to where they cannot close the individuals or remove the FTEs, so the individuals that are working in those remote driver's license offices, that a lot of those are housed in our county treasurer's offices. But we will work on language and then have that discussion about how we can move forward. And like I said, we're going to have Dylan giving us an update. We talked about that yesterday in our agenda planning meeting. Any other questions? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really like the direction that we're going on this line of discussion. We've seen this behavior from this agency under various administrations. This isn't new. Once upon a time, I remember the phones were no longer being answered because, budget cuts, you see. And there was a time when the mail wasn't getting opened because, budget cuts. So I'm enthusiastic about the direction that we're taking this discussion. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Hoffman, of the number of FTEs they have, do you know what percentage of those are still remotely working from home or working in the building?
Chairman Hoffman.
No, I'm sorry. We can get that for you, but we did not ask that. We'll find out and get that for you.
Thanks.
Any further questions in regard to fiscal year 2024? Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the knowledge of the committee here, the intent of the committee when they were hearing revenues testimony was when we heard that there were 40 positions unfilled and they had been unfilled for years, we came to the conclusion that you're performing your required statutory duties with the number of FTEs that they had, and the 10 reduction was very conservative. So that was the intent, though at the time we didn't dive into the minutia as Chairman Hoffman explained, but the intent was if they're not going to be used, they haven't been used for years, they haven't been filled, they have no intent to fill them, this was a perfect place to tactically reduce the budget without impact. So just wanted to give you that context.
Any further questions? Representative Francis.
More comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. More comment than anything, but did you guys talk about shrinkage? You know, there's that thing in the budget where sometimes their budget doesn't reflect the actual number of allowed positions. Did you guys discuss that on this one?
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, we asked them how many they had vacant, and there was like 47 some odd that were vacant, and so there was a motion to reduce that by 10, and we didn't really get into. I'm assuming that most of these are funded, but some of these might not even be funded, you know, and so I mean, really, to me, the whole threat of saying, well, we're going to have to close someplace, it really isn't even needed. My deal, though, is that I don't want us to do something that then they go and close those offices, and then we hear from our constituents, well, they told us it was because you guys cut them. So we need to be careful how we do this.
Any further questions or comments in regards to fiscal year 2024? Seeing none, may move on to fiscal year 2025.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Agency requests $122.0 million, including $16.8 million SGF and expenditures, 1,049.2 FTEs. In 25, it's all funds decrease of 1.7 million, or 1.3% below the fiscal year 24 revised estimate. The decrease is attributed to the conclusion of the taxpayer notification cost expenditure. So those, if you remember, we have paid the last, well, since the law has been in effect, we have paid for the notices to go out to our taxpayers for property tax. That ended in fiscal year 24. So in fiscal year 25, that was taken out of the budget. The governor recommended $123.2 million, including $16.8 million SGF and expenditures, 1,049.2 FTEs. That's an all funds increase of 1.2 million, or 1% above the agency request, and the increase is because the governor put that payment back in. So to pay for the printing and postage costs for the taxpayer notification cost fund. The budget committee, we had a little bit of discussion about that, and a majority of the committee felt that we did need to go ahead and continue to pay that notification cost. I actually think there's a bill out there right now to make that permanent. So we went along with the governor, and we also deleted 10 vacant FTE positions, which is the same 10 as in 24. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Committee, any questions in regards to fiscal year 2025? Seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
All right. With that, I will move the adoption of the Kansas Department of Revenue's budget for 24 and 25.
Committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Turk. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, committee, that is the conclusion of our meeting today, and we will be meeting again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So until then, we are adjourned.